Hey everyone, it's Mr. Scott here. I hope you're all doing well and staying healthy, and I miss you and I hope to see you all soon. Today we're going to continue our lesson on Easter. And what we're doing is each week we're looking at different characters that were involved in the Easter story. Now last week we learned about the crowd and how the crowd was so excited when Jesus rode into Jerusalem. But as time went on, their opinions changed a little bit on Jesus. And we talked about peer pressure and how it's easy to let other people influence you, even though you know it's not the right thing. Today we're going to be talking about another group of people, the disciples. Do you remember who the disciples were? When Jesus began his ministry, he picked 12 men called his disciples. And these men were to follow him wherever he went. And they were ordinary men with common flaws, but Jesus poured wisdom and biblical teachings into their hearts and minds. In today's lesson, we're going to look at these disciples. And while they seem to be dedicated to Jesus, we will see a different response as Jesus was arrested and eventually nailed to the cross. Let's check it out.
It was the festival of Passover. Jesus and his 12 disciples had gathered in a room for their last supper together. Jesus knew it would be their final time to be together before he died. So he told his friends many important things. There was one very important message he had for them. One of the disciples would betray him. "The one who betrays me will dip his food in the bowl at the same time I do," said Jesus. And just as he said that, Judas reached over and dipped his food in the bowl. With shock and anger, Judas looked at Jesus. The Son of God knew beforehand that Judas would betray him and deliver him over to the chief priests and religious leaders. Judas shoved away from the table and scrambled for the door in a rush. He didn't look back. He scurried away to do his evil deed. All the other disciples looked on in awe. They could not believe that one of their own was a traitor. Jesus understood that the hour was soon approaching, that he would suffer and die for the sin of all mankind. He told the disciples to remember his death and to think of him often. He took the cup and bread, gave thanks for it, broke it, and handed it to each of them. He told them to think of the wine as his blood and the bread as his body. The disciples did not understand what Jesus was saying. Peter, one of the disciples, said that he would never leave Jesus. But Jesus quickly told Peter that before that night was over, Peter would deny that he knew him 3 times. Meanwhile, with the chief priests, Judas carried out his evil deed. He agreed to hand Jesus over to the cruel leaders if they would pay him a lot of money. Of course, Judas knew it was wrong, but there was no turning back now. By now it was dark outside. Jesus and his disciples went to a garden. Jesus wanted to prepare for his death, so he fell to his knees, bowed his head, and poured out his heart to his heavenly Father. "Oh God," he cried, "I don't want to suffer, but I will do what you want me to." His prayer went on for hours. The disciples couldn't stay awake and fell asleep nearby. Jesus, however, couldn't sleep and stayed awake in prayer. When Jesus came to his disciples, he found them asleep. Even after he woke them and encouraged them to pray, they fell asleep again. The second time, Jesus woke them and told them that the time had come for him to be arrested. The disciples were confused and did not know what to expect. A group of armed guards rushed up to Jesus and his disciples. Judas was with them. Judas walked over and kissed Jesus on the cheek, a sign to the soldiers that Jesus was the one they should arrest. Peter wasn't about to let this happen. He was going to protect Jesus. He whipped out his own sword and slashed at the guards. In doing so, he chopped off the ear of one of the servants. Jesus rebuked Peter gently. Jesus knew that Peter meant well, but this was all part of God's plan. Jesus touched the man's ear and completely healed it. The guards were amazed. "Have you come with swords and clubs to arrest me like a robber?" Jesus asked, looking up at his attackers. The guards knew that Jesus had been preaching and teaching in public places, and no one ever tried to arrest him there. This night was different. The disciples were afraid and ran away, but Peter followed Jesus at a distance. Jesus was led all the way from the Garden of Gethsemane through the Kidron Valley to the high priest. There he was interrogated. They were trying to find a reason to kill him. Of course, Jesus was honest and true. He simply told them what he had always declared. He was the Son of God. This enraged the leaders. They led him to another court to obtain permission to put him to death. Meanwhile, Peter stood outside in the courtyard around a fire with other bystanders. He wanted to see what happened. "You're his disciple, aren't you?" a servant girl suddenly asked him. "No, I'm not," Peter swore and became angry. "I don't even know him." 3 times it happened that Peter was asked if he knew Jesus, and 3 times he lied. Then suddenly, the 3rd time he lied, a rooster crowed 3 times, and Peter remembered what Jesus had said. He ran away, feeling horrible, weeping bitterly.
Well, definitely a lot going on in this part of the story. We first start with Jesus sitting with his disciples celebrating Passover, which is what we call the Last Supper. And it's here where Jesus tells his disciples that one of them is going to betray him. And then after, Jesus goes off to pray, and he brought some of his disciples with him, and he told them to keep watch while he prayed. And his disciples fell asleep, not once, not twice, but 3 times. And finally, as Jesus predicted, one of his disciples, Judas, helped capture and arrest Jesus. Clearly in the story, Jesus' disciples did not make good decisions. They didn't put their trust in God, and they let other things get in the way of what was right. You know, putting your trust in God is not always easy, especially during times of hardship. With everything going on in the world today, people getting sick, losing their jobs, having to stay in their houses, it can be easy for someone to turn their back on God. Even Jesus' most loyal followers struggled with this. But what I want you to learn from today's story is that your faith and your love for God will be tested at times. In times of fear, in times of anger, and in times of doubt. But these are the times when we must rely on God the most. It's these times when your faith in God will shine. Well, I hope you enjoyed today's lesson, and I've included some activities below that you can do at home to help better understand today's message. I hope you all continue to be healthy and stay healthy, and I'll see you soon.